Maybe you clicked on this lesson and immediately thought, whoa, I do not want to start a UGC agency. Maybe you work at an agency already or in-house at a brand, and you're thinking, I just want to know how to source these people. And that's totally fine. However, regardless of where you are, I'd approach building this framework like you are starting your own agency. And with this process, you definitely could. So now that you've had the brief and you've discovered the types of creators you want to source, what happens next? The first part is to reach out to the UGC creators. And if you're using a third-party solution, then this is usually done via their platform, which again is one of those downfalls. You're not owning the creator relationship. You're probably sick and tired of hearing me say that, but I've already explained why that is important. Better workflow, generally better prices, and ultimately better converting content. So when I actually first started reaching out to creators myself, I actually felt like this process was going to be more complicated than it really was. However, really, the more genuine and organic, the better. You'll likely be reaching out to these creators in one of three ways. So either via DM, via email, or via a form on their website. I urge you to not overcomplicate this. So here are two of the scripts that I've used when sourcing UGC creators. Here's one that's a DM, and here's one that I sent via email. And from there, you can begin the negotiation, which probably leads to your next question. How much are you going to pay these people? In general, I am paying $150 to $500 per batch of raw content. And if you're also trying to negotiate whitelisting rights, that's going to be super dependent on the creator. I've seen it for as little as $150 to $250 per month, so a usage rate of 30 days, all the way up to $1,000 per month. And I'm going to be honest, when it comes to payment and when it comes to negotiating the actual scope of the brief, there's going to be some back and forth on this, and that's totally normal. I often find that creators will like to try and negotiate the rate, and if you can try to come somewhere in the middle for them, or if you really can't budge on your budget, just let them know that, and a majority of the time they're going to accept the work if they're really passionate about your brand. The next thing I want to talk about is developing your creator Rolodex. One of the most valuable things that is going to be coming out of this process for you is a Rolodex of creators that you've worked with and trust. I'm also going to include the template that I use in Notion for maintaining and tracking creators. It's made working with repeat creators a heck of a lot easier. And for what it's worth, this is more of a database and less of a tracker. In fact, the tracker that we use client to client is incredibly simple and is really just based on the type of contract that we have with them. And the way that we've used this Rolodex in the past is we only actually put creators that we've already worked with inside here. You could easily add a section for people that you'd like to work with but haven't quite worked with yet. But for me, it was important to build up a Rolodex of people that we've only worked with, which is why I decided to make it this way. So let's hop into this Rolodex and I can show you around. Here you can see it's really simple. We have the first and last name. We also have the age range, gender, race. I also really like to link out to the Instagram and TikToks and show follower count. And then the tags is really interesting. I really like maintaining and understanding, hey, this is the type of content that this creator is really passionate about making. I also make sure to add a tag for whitelisting and then top creator or top talent if that's someone that I really, really like working with. I also really like to track the source. So, hey, where did we actually find this person? Was it Instagram, TikTok? Was it a friend? Was it on B-roll, so one of those third-party solutions, so that I can understand, hey, which creators or which places am I sourcing creators is actually working. More and more too, I've been tracking the languages spoken. So what I like to do is I like to list the projects that I've worked on with certain creators with a link to the actual content so that it's really easy for us to sift through. And then I have notes here. Here's where I'm just making really qualitative analysis about the actual work they did. Hey, was the content good? Was the communication good? And I also like to track their rates here as well. In addition to having this template, I've also included 4 of my top creators that I really love working with. I would highly recommend any of these 4 creators just to tell them that Dara sent you. So if you've decided that you do want to try executing on modular content and ultimately only sourcing creators for raw clips and testimonials, then you are going to need to find video editors. And I won't lie, hiring good video editors is going to be infinitely harder than hiring good creators. I find that there's a massive disconnect between editors that do YouTube editing versus documentary filmmaking editing versus TikTok versus performance creative. So finding video editors who can make really quality performance UGC or even just performance video editing in general is kind of a challenge. So here are the top places that I've used to find video editors that really know their stuff when it comes to performance editing. And number one is Twitter, specifically in the D2C community. In fact, here's a Twitter list of people that you should follow and have conversations with if you're trying to find a video editor. Many of these people I've already worked with before. Another place to find video editors is Fiverr and Upwork. I just find that almost everyone tries this at some point. And you can find really talented people, especially if you're on a budget and you're trying to find more people overseas. Additionally, if you're trying to find someone more full-time and you don't mind hiring them out of the office, I do think it's going to be hard to find someone in a specific location, and this is probably a role that's really good to hire remotely, then I would highly suggest looking into hiring someone full-time from Latin America or even the Philippines via Oceans, Growth Assistant. This is actually something that I'm working through right now. Also, if you want more feedback or you want more tailored advice for how to find an editor, or if I have any editors that I would specifically recommend for your use case, just reach out to me in the course forum and I'll be sure to give you a few recommendations that are a little bit more tailored for you. Another thing that I would suggest too is there are a number of TikTokers or UGC creators that are actually pretty good at making performance edits. So it's also an option to reach out to the ones that you really like their edits and see what their rates are for a video or for a performance creative. The big key here is though that you have to have them do an edit test. And what I would do here is I would simply take a folder of raw assets that have B-roll, that have testimonial, and the creator brief, and I would have them simply execute on that work as if they were your employee. I would also suggest paying someone for this work. If you can offer them $50 to $150, I think that's incredibly fair. But my big reminder here is this person is not a creative strategist. And if you're looking for someone who's more of a video editor / creative strategist, then you're gonna ultimately pay more of a premium for that role. In my experience too, I tend to hire people based on video edit that they do. And in general, I was paying around $100 to $150 for those final edits. It would generally include one base edit with 2 hooks. The next thing I want to dive into is modular content, because you've definitely heard me use this phrase a little bit throughout this course. So exactly what is that? Essentially, when I am working with creators, I have them execute on what I call modular content. This is something that's really popular in our industry in general. But essentially, the creator is not doing their own editing. What they are doing is they're essentially creating a small library of content that includes a testimonial and several B-roll clips that we can then overlay on that testimonial. And a lot of this also goes back to the brief. So an example of this, say we were executing on a problem solution style UGC brief. The general outline of that kind of script goes problem, agitate the problem, present the product or service as the solution to that problem, benefits, testimonials, social proof, and then catchy CTA. And in theory, with modular content, you can swap out different hooks, different problems, different problem agitators, different benefits, different forms of social proof, and different CTAs. And this is at the core of what modular content is. It's the ability to have different content blocks that you can swap in and out. Now, the way I am generally approaching this when I work with creators is I will have them make their own standalone single testimonial ad. And then after I do a few of those, I like to then start swapping in compilations. And that's where I see modular content really flourish, because I'm able to take out several different types of the problem agitators and the problems and the hooks that all of the other creators have made and make it into like one super ad. And that leads us to the final thing that we're going to go over, which are contracts. Surprisingly way more complicated than I would have originally thought. In fact, over the last few months even, I've had increasingly more and more conversations with creators about the nature of the contract. Essentially, there's a lot of discourse on Twitter and on TikTok about what creators need to look out for to protect themselves in regards to the contract. So this isn't something that you should take lightly. There are 2 main ways that you can go about creating a contract for your UGC creators. Number 1, you can have a lawyer draw up a contract with tons of jargon that reads, well, like a legal document. And number 2, you can draft an agreement yourself that is easy to read, understand, and really clearly outlines timelines, payment details, and ultimately the deliverables. And I'm going to be honest, At the agency where I used to work, we used number one. This resulted in a ton of comms and back and forth with creators, and to be honest, 9 times out of 10, we ultimately ended up altering the contract anyways. However, if you're incredibly concerned about legal action, then this is probably the route that you're gonna wanna take. However, in my personal practice, I actually opted for the easier to use and understand contract. And I've also seen other big brands use this approach as well. But I will flag that this is not legal advice. And if you are concerned about that, then you need to make your own decision. But let's jump in. I'm going to show you what my contracts look like. I actually use a platform called Jotform for this. So you can see here, the most important things are going to be the content details, timelines, compensation, and even the copyright. Now, I generally ask for full rights, and I am happy to pay more for that so that I can use that content really as I wish. And to be honest, if creators aren't amendable for that, or they give me a lot of problems and a lot of back and forth on it, I just don't work with them. However, if you already have a contract that you use for your creators and you've noticed a lot of back and forth with them, these are generally the things that is going to cause you a lot of roadblocks. Number one is the indemnification clause, which is essentially going to hold the creator responsible if someone decides to take legal action with the brand for the content that is made. Honestly, I don't blame creators. I would not want that type of clause in my contract either. The other thing that creators are likely to zero in on are usage rights. So again, I said that I normally want full rights, but sometimes creators only want it for paid, or they want it for 30 days or for 60 days or 90 days, and they try to charge you more for it. I just personally think that is a lot of back and forth that's not necessary, so I will tend to pay creators more so that I can have full usage rights. And the same thing for the raw assets. A lot of times creators are going to charge more for that, and I am fine with that because I want as much flexibility as I can when building up my library of content. The way that I like to look at this exchange is that the creators are producing the content that I want to have full usage rights to. So they are making a library of content for me. I'm not just necessarily working with them because they're UGC or because they're creators. I'm really just looking at them starting to supply more content for my library. And the other thing that they're likely to zero in on are payment terms. Some of them, for instance, are going to want half upfront, which I also don't do. However, I do understand that that makes a lot of creators nervous. So if you're going out and trying to work with a big name UGC creator and you don't really have much traction in the industry and you don't have anyone that you've worked with previously, they might try and negotiate a 50% on signing and a 50% on close just because they don't know if they can trust you or not. And that's just kind of how it is. And that's it. That is the UGC process. It is a lot, but if you can go through that and implement a process that's like that for your own brand or even your own agency, you're going to see the benefits of it and start to have a lot more content that converts. I'll see you in the next lesson.